Hi, we are a community organization and we're here to create inclusive early learning environments. I'm Ashley.
I'm Kayla.
This is
Sharon.
and
Hope.
perfect. So here's kind of an overview of our full scenario at ABC Daycare. So at ABC Daycare in Ottawa, there are two new families who have joined the center. There's a family with two dads named Peter and Kyle, and a child who identifies as gender diverse and uses the pronouns they, them. From this, we observe that the educators are addressing the collective as boys and girls, which does not affirm the pronouns of the child who identifies as gender diverse. They are also misgendering that child as they show interest in trucks, which is associated with their stereotypical sex they were assigned at birth. So they're making the assumption that they are a boy, even though they identify as they, them. They are also not connecting with Peter and Kyle, despite Peter and Kyle's efforts to connect and find LGBTQ supports in the community. And educators also ignore the family's preferences to use the first names Peter and Kyle, instead ask which one is mom and which one is dad. So from this, Kayla will explain what this means from a GBA plus perspective.
Neutrality overlooks the diverse lived experiences of many people, and individual perceptions are insufficient for intersectional analysis. Inclusion requires multiple and diverse perspectives, and the key issue that's going on right now is that gender binaries are being reinforced. There's an assumption that all families are heteronormative, and this ignores the intersectionality and diverse identities of the community. It's also an issue how they rely on individual practice rather than inclusive systems, and it maintains a power imbalance and silences voices and overlooks the impact on belonging and well-being.
I'm going to talk about what might be changed. The first step is to use more inclusive and identity-affirming language, for example, respecting parents' wishes. It's important to remove gendered assumptions from everyday practice. Another key change is to move beyond individual actions to more inclusive systems. For example, the classroom environment should be inclusive, not just dependent on the educator. In addition, increasing representation in books and materials can help all children feel seen and included. Finally, the educators need ongoing self-reflection and feedback to recognize their own biases and continuously improve their practice.
So to actually create a change, we've created tools. We would start with a needs assessment to understand the educator's knowledge, beliefs, and comfort levels around gender and diversity and inclusive language and diverse family structures. This helps us identify the root cause rather than making assumptions. Next, we would provide professional learning focused on inclusive practices such as correct pronouns, respecting family preferences, and moving away from gendered language. This aligns with the College of Early Childhood Educators Codes of Ethics and How Does Learning Happen, which emphasizes inclusion and belonging. Educators will also be introduced to the GBA Plus tool and do the self-assessment, as well as Dr. Lee Golden's work to help them understand how to actually implement and create reflection practices in the classroom. They will go over this tool to understand how to create inclusion in their work, and we will also provide an inclusion worker to support them and provide ongoing coaching to help sustain these practices, as well as include inclusive books and materials that will be added to the classroom to support representation. And within the training we are providing from Dr. Lee Golden, there will also be support on how to implement and use these books within the classroom. Next, for our action plan to actually implement this, we will of course be doing the needs assessment. But with this action plan, this is important to add to ensure that it actually gets implemented and that change is lasting and ongoing.
Hi, I'm Hope, and I'm going to be talking about the role of community development practices in early learning and reflect a little bit upon it. The scenario highlights the important role of community development practices in early learning, particularly in creating inclusive, respectful, and responsive environments for diverse families and identities. Community development focuses on building strong relationships with families, valuing their experience, and adapting practices to meet their needs. In this case, the educator's use of gendered language, misgendering, and dismissal of different family structures shows a lack of inclusion and inclusive practices and a need for a greater reflection and self-awareness. The scenario is very realistic as many early learning environments are still influenced by traditional views of gender and family. Educators might not have had enough training or may hold personal and cultural biases that impact their interactions with children and family. The tools, practices, and approaches used are realistic tools for everyday practice, including bibliotherapy and working on our biases. The tools and action plans are likely to improve the situation, but not immediately. A needs assessment and ongoing training can help shift educators' understanding and practice over time, especially if they're open to learning. Support from an inclusion worker adds practical guidance, while inclusive materials can have an immediate positive impact on children's sense of belonging. Other tools such as checking biases, using inclusive language, and incorporating diverse resources are also likely to improve the situation. However, their effectiveness depends on consistency, educators' willingness, and support from leadership.
Here's a look at our final reflections that Hope just went over. And of course, thank you for listening to our presentation about making early learning environments more inclusive. Here's our references and of course our GBA Plus certifications. Thank you.